to relent our effort, that our people will never go in vain. And that is why we are here to demonstrate our collective effort that our people, we stand with you. So I am broadcasting on my Twitter, on my Facebook, and on my YouTube account. So either way, if you miss, you will always get the message clear. But I want to thank, before I dive into this, I want to thank the President of this great nation, the United States. I want to thank the Secretary of State for these great nations. I want to thank the U.S. Congress. I want to thank the U.S. Senate. I want to thank the U.S. Department of Defense. I want to thank Nikki Haley, the United States Permanent Representative to the United Nations, for their collective effort and join to ensure that the sovereignty of the people of Southern Cameroon is respected. We are in a world where people ignore the reality. We have a United Nations that has deviated from the original objective of that office, that will stand for peace and security for maintained in the lasting century. But unfortunately, the leadership of the United Nations is in disarray. The United Nations office that one will expect, and that is why when you're seeing chaotic scene going around the world, is because we have an office that has deviated from the original objectives, that is the United Nations, and has deviated from these original objectives and stood with the brutal dictatorship in and around the world. And that is why you find crisis erupted all over the world. It's because we have a leadership crisis at the body where we thought the purpose was to maintain peace and security. Instead, they choose the other way around as a banditry office, an office that harvests and deploy brutal, evil dictatorship around the world. And that is why the crisis continues to erupt in South America, in Indochina, in other areas of where they have less economic prosperity, where a certain individual takes advantages of the citizens and exploit them against the wishes of the people. And so because of this, United Nations crisis, or the United Nations office that is made up of the most corrupted individuals, especially you have someone at the helm of the United Nations, Antonio Gutierrez. Antonio Gutierrez, some people believe that by default, when someone has been a president, you don't know how repressive he was when he was in that country. And so by default, they believe that because he has to be a president, that he will be a legitimate person to lead a nation. But unfortunately, that is not always true the case. We can take, for example, we have universities and other high-level institutions. They almost harbor about different diversified people of different worlds that come in with special background, intellectual ability. But the university president is able to accommodate and bring them and to feed them with avenue of educations. And yet, they have not been recognized throughout the world, the president of the universities. They have exercised, trained the most brilliant people and the people that lead this world. But unfortunately, we rely on the past president as someone that can execute a leadership. And that is why the current United Nations Secretary General, Antonio Gutierrez, because they happen to be one of a president, and that gives him a mandate to be head of the United Nations. Unfortunately, as a corrupted leader, had derailed the purpose of that office. I am not saying that president cannot be a good leadership, but someone that has the most corrupted system is now leading the United Nations. And so because he believed of his past repressive system against the citizens, and so he are almost in line with another repressive regime. And that is why you find around the world where there is an uprising against all this repressive system. So I am going to be speaking here about the Federal Republic of Ambazonian. The Federal Republic of Ambazonian is not exception. This is a document that specifies and recognizes the people of Ambazonia as a sovereign nation. The people have stood up. They've written several tons of letters to the same office, and no one cared to respond because their selfish interest is more in line with their policy. We have a French leadership, a France leadership under Emmanuel Macron. One will expect a young and more energetic leader. He will better understand the problems of the world, and he will judge it better. But unfortunately, many people of the Ambazonia embraced him, thought that he was an exceptional leader that could bring a lasting peace and security for the people of Ambazonia. But unfortunately, he is not exception. He is of the same line with the French system. Can you imagine that while the people of Ambazonia are quest for freedom, instead of him going to the bargaining table and say, this is the wishes of the people, I cannot derail their demand, and I will stand with them. But unfortunately, Emmanuel Macron, just like the United Nations or Antonio Gutierrez, they are all of the crumbled system. They believe that Africa is the most ruthless place that they can machinery control all aspects of their life. But unfortunately, the people of Ambazonia and the brave men and women across the globe, we will stand and we will support our citizens because we acknowledge that something is wrong somewhere. And so that is why I am speaking here from the great state of Texas. I am bringing this attention from the fellow brothers and sisters that we have long overdue for our freedom. Within the past 56 years of one brutal dictatorship to the next brutal, despite the fact that we enjoy, our former parents enjoy freedom where they can elect their officials. But unfortunately, we met with the gruesome dictatorship of La Republique du Cameroon. So I am here bringing this attention to the fellow American citizens. You may have watched on my Facebook all the posting. It's because our people is at war. Our people are fighting for their freedom. We, as a sovereign people, we cohabiting with a neighboring country, La Republique du Cameroon. Many people may not have known because they have used every avenue, taking the advantages of the opportunity to erase us in the place of the planet and single-handedly form what they call La Republique du Cameroon. And many people will think that La Republique is just a single nation. But I am here to let the world understand that La Republique is the most corrupted system. So our people have stood firmly. And that is why you see some of the military that have been shot and killed and placed on my Facebook. It is the ongoing crisis because our people has taken up arms. I can assure the American Congress, the U.S. Department of Defense, U.S. White House, the president of the great nation and the beloved nation on earth. You may not agree with my assessment that the United States is the most brilliant nation on earth. It's because the rule of law supersedes each and individual egoistic mind. And that is why we are seeing what is happening in these great nations. We are not exception. Remember that the United States, before it became one of the strongest nations on earth, it's because they stood up against the aggressive behavior of the British Crown. No taxation without a representation. This philosophy captivates the people of great United States against the repressive system of the British Crown. And today you may agree with me that even though we have a same relationship like the United States had over 200 years ago, they have the same relationship. They were being colonized by Great Britain. When they were seeking for their freedom, the British people ignored. They undermined the consequences and the will of the people to stood against the enemy. And so the bravely men and women of this great nation stood firmly. No representation, no taxation without a representation. So our people of Ambazonia is not exception. We are demonstrating like the United States did over 200 years ago. We are letting La Republique understand that we are at war with them, and that any citizen of La Republique that is currently residing in Southern Cameroon territory is an enemy of our sovereignty, because we look upon our sovereignty as a legitimate freedom that we must fight for. And so anyone that stood, and even our own fellow brothers that deliberately and ignorantly ignore the reality and fail to accept that we are being brutalized by a foreign nation, one of the most brutal dictatorships on earth, now that is currently living. But our people will not surrender. Our people will stand shoulder to shoulder, block to block, as one of our comrades described it. And we use from neighbor to neighborhood. And any individual that just emerge into your neighborhood and you are very suspicious, and this is in Amber land, if you see anyone that is renting in one of your neighborhood and you don't have any clear indication who he is, especially the sounding of his voice, you must immediately suspect that it's from La Republique. Immediately, do not face that individual because you don't know who are harboring him or her. But immediately alert the Federal Republic of Ambazonian intervention force. They will immediately know what to do. So I am speaking here from the great state of the United States, that our people is at war. We are fighting the war that many nations have fought the same, and we are not exception. And that is why I am speaking here from the great state of Texas, that my fellow brothers and sisters, we are at war. The people of Ambazonia has demonstrated that we will no longer accept this form of invasion by a foreign nation, La Republique du Cameroon. So our neighborhood, we must strengthen our neighborhood. And strengthen our neighborhood is that we must look about whoever is harboring within our neighborhood. Because once we envisage who is in our neighborhood, then we can be able to understand who is our enemy. Because what they are doing now is infiltrating our neighborhood. And so because we are aware of a new person that is approaching us, once you greet someone and he accepts, you immediately understand where he's coming from, he or she is coming from. Because immediately you alert. Do not